Okay, so as promised, I've been reviewing each of the James Bond films, the official films in the series, from Doctor No right up to Quantum of Solace. And I said I would be reviewing Skyfall. Now, it's been hugely, highly anticipated in the lead up to its release, mainly actually because there's been such a long gap between Quantum of Solace and Skyfall, 4 years in fact, almost to the date. And also because it is, of course, the 50th anniversary, big celebrations. It's a half century for the series, and it is the longest film series of all time. And what can I say? James Bond 23 does not disappoint in almost any form. I went to the cinema a couple of weeks ago. It's been out for a couple of weeks now here in the UK at the time that I'm doing this review. And it's just been released in the United States as well, so it will gradually get its release elsewhere around the world. But it's just done enormously well, and that's a credit really to Sam Mendes, the director, and the fact that it's very British. It's a very British institution, but this film in particular probably seems like one of the most British James Bond films, probably since The Spy Who Loved Me. In fact, with the motifs of the Union Jack parachute, it just seems to be very British, quintessentially British this time, which we haven't seen in Bond for quite a while. So, if we go back to the very beginning, yeah, I went to the cinema to see this with my girlfriend on release just over 2 weeks ago, and you sit there every time a new James Bond film comes out. If you're anything like me, you sit there like a nervous schoolboy or a nervous schoolgirl, if you're a girl, and you just sit there in anticipation of what to expect. Now, people had said that the gun barrel doesn't appear at the beginning of the film, so it doesn't. This is where the spoilers start, I must say. This review will be full of spoilers, so please, please turn the review off if you haven't yet seen Skyfall, because I am discussing many of the elements of the film, and there will be some spoilers. It's a spoiler-heavy review, and it's a film which has a lot of plot to it, so I really need to delve deeply into the story. So the film doesn't begin with the traditional gun barrel sequence, but it does begin in a way that shrouds Bond in a shadow, in mystery. You see him approaching us, approaching the middle of the screen. It's almost like a gun barrel itself. He's standing right at the end of a dark corridor, and you see him walk up very, very closely. So you get a facial shot, and he's got his gun poised, ready. And we are in the middle of a botched-up mission, and one of the agents, Ronson, from MI6, is down. He's been injured. Bond tries to stop the bleeding, but his task is to try and retrieve a missing disc, which has got the names and information of a number of MI6 agents and just secret agents around the world. So MI6 really need this back. Bond is searching this hotel room and cannot find it. It's been stolen from the laptop. So Bond tries to stop Ronson's bleeding, takes M's orders that he needs to leave, so he takes a look back at Ronson. You get one of those self-doubt moments that of Bond, which looks brilliant, and is a real interesting element to the character. And he turns, walks away out of the building and into the Land Rover, which is driven by Eve, played by Naomi Harris. And she really is a very strong field agent. And I know we've said it in the past, like lots of Bond women's, it's particularly in the 21st century, say, my Bond woman equals Bond in strength and, stamina and courage. She really does, and it's the first time for a while that we've had that in Bond, and Naomi Harris does a terrific job actually as Eve. She gets some nice comedic moments towards the beginning of the film, and she's kind of giving us a commentary and giving M a commentary, because she's reporting back to M through her earpiece to M and to Tanner, who are based in MI6, the newly improved MI6 building. The interior looks very different to the last few films. So she's reporting back. Bond is following Patrice. So there's a big chase through the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul. Of course, we've seen Istanbul in the latest Taken film, in Taken 2, if you've seen that. So lots of the Grand Bazaar sequences where they're driving along the rooftops, with it cycling along the rooftops, is we've seen the rooftops in Taken 2 recently, so but it's used to such greater extent in Bond, and some of the stunt scenes are incredible in the opening sequence, really, really incredible. So it's a big drive, big stunt chase through the Grand Bazaar, and then of course we have Bond controlling a digger and crashing some VW Beetles along the way as well, all trying to catch up with Patrice, who has the disc that he needs to retrieve. So we have M's urgent pleas, like you've got to retrieve the disc. We can't lose the disc. So of course, and Daniel Craig's Bond also says it's yes, ma'am. He says "ma'am" a lot in the films, actually, in his James Bond films to date. So it's actually quite a nice little relationship, and beginning of the relationship in this film as well, between Bond and M, which obviously drags out through the film. It's very important. It's a crucial relationship in this film in particular, between Bond and M. So Bond finds himself on top of the moving train, going straight under the tunnel. Elements of Octopussy in there, just general great elements from previous Bond films. And of course we have Eve trying to fire at Patrice but hitting Bond instead. Bond falls into the water and we segue into the title sequence. And we have Bond falling into the title sequence as if he has died, basically. We're looking at it thinking that Bond obviously hasn't died because it's the start of the Bond film, but it's another trick like they've done in some of the previous films, like You Only Live Twice, for example, Thunderball, where we think for a moment that Bond is in trouble, that Bond may have died, but obviously later on we'll find out he hasn't. So the title sequence is once again from Daniel Kleinman. He didn't return after Casino Royale for Quantum of Solace. That was Mark II who did the title sequence for that. But he is back for Skyfall, and what a credit sequence! It has huge echoes of Live and Let Die with the knives and the skulls. It's very much the idea of death, and actually it's very interesting because it's one of the first times since Goldfinger, I think, actually, that you see images of some of the characters in the title sequence itself. There's some smoke turns into Raul Silva, Javier Bardem's character, the main villain of the film. You see, and Daniel Craig is part of the credit sequence as well, which he has been for his previous films as well, for Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. So it's a fantastic opening credits sequence, works very, very well indeed. One of Daniel Kleinman's best, actually, certainly. And the song is just fantastic as well. What a brilliant choice to have Adele at singing the title theme song. The song just complements the film perfectly. If you listen to the lyrics, it's just fantastic. So it's actually one of the longest pre-title sequences. It's about 12 minutes, I think, which is about the same length as The World Is Not Enough. So it's up there as one of the longest pre-title sequences for Bond. And I think it might be one of the longest opening credit sequences as well. So we're about 15 minutes into the film now. We have M writing her obituary for Bond. And we catch up with Bond, realising that he's not dead. And he is... alcohol is damaging his liver very quickly. He's playing some drinking games. He's being cheered on by people in pubs and clubs. And he is having sex with this very interesting woman at the beginning of the film, and he's also drinking a Budweiser as well. So this is Bond drinking some beer at the beginning of the film as well as his vodka martinis. So we have this moment after the opening credit sequence where things die down, things slow down after the very quick pace of the pre-credits sequence. Things slow down for about 15 or 20 minutes, and we're introduced to Mallory, who is played superbly by Ralph Fiennes, who is quizzing M, basically. We get this idea from the outset that this could be M's last mission. Could be her last mission because apparently she is being, well, technically being forced into retirement 2 months in 2 months' time. So this will probably be her last mission. But she wants to make sure that she's got MI6 in order before that happens. And there's a huge explosion at MI6 towards the beginning of the film. So we know from the outset that M is in jeopardy. There's very much attacks on M's life and her status in the film. The fact that she is an authority figure. There's an attack both on that and also for her motherly status, which we will go into a little bit later. So we have a number of new characters introduced in the film. We have Tanner returning again after Quantum of Solace, much bigger role for him, which is very nice. He introduces Bond back into the new MI6 when Bond returns to active duty. Bond has to pass some tests, and we get this idea very early on that after Bond has been weakened by Eve in the opening sequence of the film, he's let himself go and he's becoming an older man. And M actually says, you know the rules of the game, you've been playing it long enough. So we have this Bond here that in some ways is going back to the very beginning, but this film is very much set probably a number of years after Casino Royale. But certainly before Dr. No, because of the events that happen later in the film, which I will explain later. But this is an idea that Bond and M are very much trying to work together in this film. They are out of their league. They realise that somebody is trying to attack MI6, trying to attack their base and their foundations. The very things that they work for, the things that they live for as well. So that's a nice dynamic that we have from the outset, really. So we return to MI6. Eve is now suspended from active duty, from field work, so she is working for Mallory at the moment, Ralph Fiennes' character. And Bond is sent back to duty, as much to the chagrin of Mallory. Mallory thinks that M puts too much faith in Bond and has a bit of a, has too much of a soft side towards Bond, that she has too much sympathy for Bond. So we see that darker side of the Mallory character, but he grows in every scene that you see him in, which is fabulous. It's a great character arc for him. And of course we move from there to Bond discovering the new Q, who is played with it's a great sense of fun actually by Ben Whishaw, who has starred with Daniel Craig previously in Layer Cake. He was also in a film called Perfume about 6 years ago, where he was playing as Killer. So this time he plays Q. It's a much younger Q, and I am so pleased that they've gone down this route and they haven't decided to go for the very traditional old man style Q, because it doesn't fit. That kind of personification doesn't fit today, doesn't fit modern society, but the new Q does. The fact that he's a major Boothroyd is pushing it slightly, is pushing it beyond our kind of beyond what we can really believe, but he certainly plays a very interesting Q, and this is a Q who is at the top of his game with technology. He invents firewalls. He can hack into computer systems. He can trace wrongdoings with computers, which is one of the central parts of this film, because we later discover that the main villain of the film is a computer hacker. Something I must mention: after Bond meets Q, there's some great lines, by the way, some great dialogue between Bond and Q in the film, especially about the exploding pen. We don't really go in for that anymore. It's a great line, brilliant. I loved that. And I must say, actually, this film, there are lots of humorous lines, much funnier than Daniel Craig's previous two Bonds, which is lovely to see. That's what we really needed, I think, particularly after Quantum of Solace, which had a very dark tone to it. We needed something that was a little bit lighter, that took itself a little less seriously, and that film achieves this in many ways. this film, sorry, achieves that in many ways. So from there we move to Shanghai and Macau very quickly, and I've got to say, Roger Deakins' cinematography, if he isn't Oscar nominated for his cinematography for this film, it is, I don't know what's going on at the Academy, because it is stunning. I have to say, the sweeping shots over Shanghai, where we land down into Bond's apartment where he is swimming, is just beautiful. Shanghai looks beautiful at night under Roger Deakins' cinematic eye. And when we go into Macau as well, we see with Naomi having Eve having shaved Bond. She says, you look the part now. It's old dog, new tricks. It's again another brilliant line, and it's about 40 minutes into the film, and we now know that this is Bond. And Daniel Craig, I have to say, looks the most comfortable in a tuxedo than he has done in his previous two films. Casino Royale, he looked slightly uncomfortable. Quantum of Solace was better, but here now, when he walks through into the casino, and when he's sailing on the boat as well, coming past the Komodo dragons in the sea, in the water, it's breathtaking. It's breathtaking cinematography, and I just looked at it thinking I desperately want to go there. It just looked fantastic. It looks so good. Real credit to Roger Deakins for that. And of course, here we meet Séverine, played deliciously by Bérénice Marlowe. One of the only criticisms that I can mention about the film, which is what many people have said actually when reviewing Skyfall, is that her character isn't developed quite as much as it should be. She's really on screen for no more than about 10 minutes, which is a shame really, because it's a strong character, and Sam Mendes himself has actually said in interviews that Bérénice Marlowe is his idea of the typical Bond woman. She is the epitome of the Bond woman. So it's a shame, therefore, that we don't see more of her on screen and more of her character. But the idea of the character is that she introduces Bond to the villain. So we get Daniel Craig's first proper delivery of the world famous line, Bond, James Bond. He says it to Séverine at the poker table, and the game table, and it's a great delivery of the film. It's almost kind of like he's said it's almost like he said it so many times that it's become second nature. She says he says Bond, James Bond. It's almost, casting it aside. It's a little bit very much like Timothy Dalton saying the line, the way he just says it very offhand, Bond, James Bond. This is Daniel Craig saying it in almost the same way. It's very theatrical at the end of Casino Royale. He didn't say it at all in Quantum of Solace, and now thankfully it returns. The sequence as well, where we have where Bond is trying to make his escape from the bodyguards, from Severine's bodyguards. One of them falls into the pit with the Komodo dragon. A little bit of CGI there, and it didn't really bother me when I was watching it. Some people have been really bothered by the CGI and said that it looks really bad, but I don't agree at all. To be honest, it wasn't in your face. It wasn't CGI like the windsurfing sequence in Die Another Day. So quite frankly, I'm quite happy. I had no problem with that at all, seeing that. But there was a wonderful moment which I don't think anybody has touched on yet, actually, in any reviews that I've listened to or read of Skyfall, where the villain knocks Bond to the floor, and Bond actually turns around and points like he's really scared, literally points like that, towards the dragon. And he's trying to get, obviously, the attention of the villain. He wants the thug to realise that the dragon is just behind them. And it's an inversion on what Kananga does with Bond under the water when the shark is coming towards them at the end of Live and Let Die, just before Bond puts the capsule in Kananga's mouth to inflate him. So we know, if you've heard interviews with Sam Mendes and Daniel Craig, that the first film they watched was Live and Let Die. It was their first Bond experience, and there are a number of moments, particularly that one. I noticed that one straight away, that hark back to Live and Let Die, which is a wonderful little moment. It's very, very nice. And the way that Bond just gets up and hands Eve the case and says, put it all on red, and just walks out. He says a line, I think, as well. He says, "Oh, it's the circle of life." It's great, and the humour is just spot on in Skyfall. It really is. It's not over the top. It's not too blasé either. It's just right, and Daniel Craig doesn't overemphasize it. Daniel Craig's Bond isn't particularly about humour. It's very much like Timothy Dalton in many ways, but a number of people said that Timothy Dalton had no humour. Go back and watch those films, because there is some humour in there, definitely. It's not obvious, it's not blindingly obvious like in some of Roger Moore's films, for example, or some of the later Sean Connery ones, but it's there, just like here in Daniel Craig's third outing as Bond. Much more humour this time, which is nice to see. So from here, we have a little sensual scene with Bond and Severine sharing a shower together. There's a wonderful line. It always made me smile when I've seen the film about 3 times now in the cinema, and it's made me smile each time, where he comes up behind her and says, "I like you better without your Beretta." It's just great. It just rolls off the tongue. It's brilliantly written, actually, this film. Neil Purvis and Robert Wade returning for their 5th James Bond film as writers, and John Logan's also helped them with the screenwriting for this film as well, and it's a brilliantly written film, actually. Very, very great screenplay. But of course you would kind of expect it. They've had 4 years to prepare after Quantum of Solace, so plenty of time, lots of time to get the elements right. Lots of people complained about Quantum of Solace. Skyfall is such an improvement, it really is. If you're worried, just go and see it. You'll understand. It is such an improvement over Quantum of Solace. And it's not that Quantum of Solace is a terrible film either. I really don't think it is. But Skyfall is a huge improvement. It is a big improvement over its predecessor. So from there, we're just over an hour into the film now, and we have the introduction to the villain. And I have to say, people are really commending Javier Bardem as the villain of the piece, and he is extraordinary. The moment he walks into the frame, it's all done in one take, I believe. He walks very slowly, just at a leisurely pace, towards Bond from the other end of a very long room. So he comes out of a lift and he walks towards Bond, and he's recounting a story, an analogy basically, about 2 rats. And how there are 2 rats left, and they start eating each other. They start preying on each other, and he's using that analogy with MI6 agents. So this is what Bond is like, and this is what he is like. He is a previous MI6 agent, and he is bitter with M over the fact that she left him to die. Basically, that he was captured and he was left to die. So we see a very vicious side to Javier Bardem, and the character is just terrific. There's so much menace in those eyes, and the way that he does so much with his mouth and so much with his eyes. When he makes that noise, it's almost he reminds me of Hannibal Lecter in many ways, where Hannibal Lecter's doing his that sort of noise, with the I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. That's what it reminded me of, Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal Lecter, which is huge praise for Javier Bardem. It is one of the best villains in the film series, in this series. It really is. It's terrific, and it's such a good character, such a great motive for the character as well. So, Bond manages to escape from Silver's island. Silver is captured. We see it's the end of Severine as well, killed at the hands of her lover, of Silver, and very maliciously, actually, after they have a bit of a shooting competition, which kind of has echoes of The Man with the Golden Gun. And we see a bottle of whiskey on the table as well before their shooting competition, which, if you notice, is dated 1962, a 50-year-old classic, which obviously references the fact that the film series is 50 years old this year. Nice little nods to the fact that it's 50 years old, that we're going back to some previous Bond adventures as well. Some lovely, very casual nods, not so in your face like Die Another Day. That's the mistake they made at the 40th anniversary. The nods to the past were so blatant and so in your face. This time it's refreshing. You can take a step back, but you can look at the finer detail and think, oh yeah, I can see what they were doing there. So I'm gonna have to whiz through the rest of this review. I'll try and be a bit more succinct if I write a written review of the film. But let's talk about some other characters. So we have Silver being captured. A nice little dialogue between him and M, where he reveals in a very Dark Knight-esque scene where he's kind of captured. He's behind a black glass dome prison, and he manages to escape only after explaining how he took his cyanide pill when he was captured, and it has affected the inside of his mouth. He has no teeth, so his gums are all inflamed. He has stumps where his teeth should be, so he has false teeth. And when he takes his teeth out, you have a very sort of... It reminded me of The Dark Knight. That was one of the only things I was disappointed with in the film, actually, apart from not enough Severine. The fact that he took his teeth out and you could see the CGI there with his face. It looked a little too much like they were borrowing from The Dark Knight, like Two-Face, for example, with the skin kind of stretched down like that and his eyes stretched down a little bit like that. So you could tell the CGI there, and it wasn't one of the better moments in my opinion, but it's a very small complaint to make in a film that's otherwise fantastic. So let's talk about the strong points for the rest of the film. We have Silver attacking Judi Dench's M. It's at Embankment, where she is having a meeting with the Prime Minister. So obviously there's lots of officials there, and Bond breaks on in and fires guns, very professional. He looks terrific. He kicks a gun over to Eve. Eve protects the minister, gets her out of the room, and Mallory is injured as well, trying to protect M, which is a very interesting sequence, which we'll come back to a little bit later. So the importance of Mallory can't be understated, really. He's a very important character in the film. So Silver's plan has failed initially to get M. There's a wonderful, wonderful moment where Bond is tracking Silver through the London Underground as well with the tube. It's refreshing to see so much of London in this film. Actually, for a British series, it's very surprising. Actually, up until this point, we haven't really seen a huge amount of London. We did see it in The World Is Not Enough, obviously, going down the Thames. You saw the Millennium Dome, Bond falling down the Millennium Dome, but really you haven't seen that much of London itself, which is Bond's home, apart from Scotland. So it's great to see that in a film series that is quintessentially British. So it's great to see so much of London. Some great stunt work as well. Some great action sequence there where Bond is chasing Silver by foot through the underground. And we have a segue there as well, the voiceover from Judi Dench when she is on trial opposite the minister, where she quotes from Alfred Lord Tennyson as well. So we have references to Winston Churchill. That's the new MI6 bunker, the new MI6 base after it was blown up at the start of the film. So Winston Churchill reference, very British, and also Alfred Lord Tennyson as well, one of the greatest poets of all time, which Judi Dench's M gives quotes from Tennyson's poetry as well. It's a wonderful sequence, great tension builder in that sequence, where you have the poem and you have police surrounding the embankment as well, where Bond has just managed to escape from the crashed tube train in the underground tracks. So from there, Bond has to escape with M, and the scene that gets the biggest round of applause, or the biggest oohs in the cinema that I've noticed, is where the Bond theme kicks into play. Thomas Newman, actually a great score for this film, I must mention. Great use of the Bond theme. It is sparingly used in the film, but it's used just in the right places. It's not used too much, which is nice to hear. So it's there, obviously, when Bond and M have to change cars, and they get into the Aston Martin DB5, which is just such a stunning car still. It's such a shame, therefore, that it has to be blown to pieces a little later in the film. But we're at the final act of the film now, the conclusion, and Bond returns to his home, to his childhood home, which is Skyfall, where his parents, Andrew Bond and Monique Delacroix Bond, brought him up. And we have the gamekeeper there as well, Kincaid, who is still there looking after the manor house, and he is played superbly by Albert Finney. Another small role, but pivotal role at the end of the film. There's a great relationship between Albert Finney, Judi Dench, and Daniel Craig at the end of the film. It's actually got a somber end of the film as well. It's very bleak, has very sort of like element of sort of end of the world, apocalyptic kind of element, where you see Bond and M travelling by car down a long winding road out of London on the road towards Scotland. It's a very somber sequence, and the whole shootout at Skyfall is just brilliant. The whole build up to it, and then the actual event itself, and the explosion has to be one of the biggest in an action film this decade, I would imagine. It is enormous. It's huge special effects. It's really fantastic. Great work from Chris Corbould and his stunt team there with for the effects of the Skyfall Lodge exploding. So from there we have Bond obviously trying to escape. We see Judi Dench's M using a gun for the first time in the series as well. It's the first time that this M has used a gun, which is nice to see. Nice to see her getting involved in the action. And of course, we have Silver tracking down M right at the end. Bond gets there just in time, knife in Silver's back, just before you almost think that Bond and Silver are going to die at the same time, because Silver is feeling some remorse towards the end. He thinks, I'm looking M once more in the eyes, which is what he wanted to do, and now I can kill her. So he says, pull the trigger. He tells them to pull the trigger and kill both of us with one bullet. But Bond beats him to it, knifes him in the back, and wonderful line again where he says, last rat standing. Wonderful, wonderful line. Typical Bond as well. And Judi Dench's M says to Bond, "What kept you?" And he says, I was in deep water. It's great. It's wonderful humour. And it's not too over the top humour as well. It's not OTT. It's just right. It's pitched just at the right level for Daniel Craig's Bond. So from there, we actually see, obviously, the end of Judi Dench's M. So hopefully you have switched off and not been listening to this review if you still haven't watched Skyfall. I did warn you at the beginning, so please don't blame me if I have spoiled the film for you, because I did say I was going to be giving a lot of plot details away. So as much as you don't want it to happen, and I did shed a tear, I must say, when it happened, because I've grown up with Judi Dench's M in the James Bond series. I grew up with Pierce Brosnan's Bond films. And she dies in Bond's arms. And so it is the last time that Judi Dench will be seen as M in the series. So 7 films. She was in all of the Pierce Brosnan films, 4 films, and she's been in Daniel Craig's first 3 Bond films as M. So she's seen 2 Bonds and 2 different Bond actors, and she's just been terrific. She's terrific in each of the films that she's in, and just a magnificent actress. So the series could be at a loss without her, actually, but I think it's in safe hands, as I will explain in a moment. So the big spoiler, of course, at the very end of the film, we don't see M's funeral, but we do see Eve talking to Bond on the rooftop. She gives him the bulldog as well, which is a bulldog ornament from M's desk, which Bond has made a smirking comment on right at the beginning of the film. So you see that relationship with Bond and M, and they had a mutual understanding for each other at the end. And the idea really was that Bond was protecting M because he saw her almost as a surrogate mother figure at the end of through the film, and certainly towards the end of the film, and that's why he sheds a tear. That's why Daniel Craig's Bond cries when M dies in his arms, because she's such an important figure. He is there. It's, you see him angry, and you see some tears when Bond cries when Tracy dies in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and when Vesper dies at the end of Casino Royale. And now, another woman, another of the most important women in Bond's life, where the authority figure M dies, he obviously sheds a tear. He's going to. He's not. He's not completely void of emotion. Bond does show his emotional side, and I'm really glad that they show that in the film, that they didn't just have Bond being very blasé about it and just saying, oh, well, she's dead. The bitch is dead. No, not really. But, no, you could see there is respect, mutual respect, and she actually says before she dies, I did get one thing right. And you know that she has respect for Bond at the end of the film, just before she dies. So it's a very moving ending for Judi Dench's M. Very moving, and the camera pans out very nicely from that. It's a very somber moment at the end of the film. So just before the very end, we have Eve telling Bond that she is remaining with a desk job. So if you haven't gotten on to who she might be as a character yet, you're about to find out, basically. Bond walks into an office with her, sees the coat stand, she puts her coat up, and he asks for her name. He says, we'd never been properly introduced. And she says, well, my name's Eve Moneypenny. This is the new Moneypenny. And Naomi Harris, in my opinion, is going to be a terrific Moneypenny. So she starts off as a field agent, then she works for Mallory and becomes Moneypenny. So as she's working for Mallory, who's the new M? Of course, it's Mallory, Gareth Mallory. So Ralph Fiennes now becomes the new M, gives the documents to Bond, says, are you ready to come back to work? Absolutely. When do I start? It's Bond is back, and you see the leather door entering back into the office. Little moments like that are moments that I love, and moments that aficionados of the Bond series will love as well. The fact that you see like the Bernard Lee style M leather door as Bond walks into the office. You see the desk, Moneypenny's desk again, which looks very traditional, like the original Moneypenny, Lois Maxwell, and there we go. That is the end of the film. And of course, then we have the gun barrel sequence, which is an improvement on Quantum of Solace. It's still quite fast and a bit sort of abrupt when Daniel Craig turns to shoot down the gun barrel. But it is an improvement on Quantum of Solace. And it's placed right at the end again. Whether it will be for the next film, I'm not sure. To be honest, I would like it to go back to the beginning, but I can understand exactly why it's at the end again for the latest film, for Skyfall. And so we have that gun barrel sequence. All the elements are in place now. We have Q, we have a new M, we have Moneypenny. Bond is well and truly back, firmly back, and we have the wonderful 50 years logo at the end, and the promise that James Bond will return in capital letters at the bottom of the screen. It's just fabulous. Ultimately, I really do have to say, I came out of the cinema thinking they've got this perfect. And thank the Lord for Sam Mendes, because he really has brought Bond fans the best film that they could possibly want. I honestly think, I didn't think it about Daniel Craig for Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. I didn't think as much of him as Bond. My favourite is probably Timothy Dalton, one of the most underrated Bond actors. But I've got to say, I think Daniel Craig just pips him to the post now. In this film alone, I think he is that good in this film. All the supporting cast are terrific, but Daniel Craig really does come into his own in this film. It's very much like his Goldfinger or his Spy Who Loved Me. This is his Goldfinger, his Spy Who Loved Me. Skyfall will stand up. I think it will stand the test of time. I think many people will consider it to be a classic. I think they probably do already, in fact. A number of people are rating it as one of the best Bond films of all time. And I've got to say, I agree with them. It's a full 10 out of 10 for me, and it's right up there for me with From Russia with Love. So I'm so thankful, I really am. And of course, James Bond will return, and it's meant to be in 2 years' time. So I'll see you for another James Bond review in 2014. Fingers crossed. So all I have to say, just to conclude, is that Skyfall is a return to form. It's a fabulous James Bond film, and I urge you, even if you're not the biggest James Bond fan, even if you don't particularly like James Bond, I really urge you to go and see it, because you may be persuaded to start watching more of the Bond films. It really is a terrific film. Don't forget to check out all the rest of my reviews. Share your thoughts with me. I appreciate that this is a longer review. It actually comes to about 40 minutes, this one. But I wanted to put as many details as I could in this review, because there is so much to say about Skyfall, and it is, of course, the most recent Bond. So please share your opinions with me on my Film Fanatic blog, or here on the YouTube video. And please let me know what you think of these James Bond reviews. I will be reviewing Everything or Nothing as well, which is the untold story of 007. I had the privilege to go and see that at the cinema on limited cinematic release for the 50th anniversary of Bond last month in October, and I shall be bringing you my review of that shortly. So James Bond will return in a couple of years' time. Thank you so much for listening to my James Bond commemorative 50th anniversary reviews.